I never imagined that a simple afternoon at the Community Arts Center would be the start of something so life-altering. At 60, most of my days were predictable, comfortable, quiet. My name's Margaret Hastings, retired school librarian, widow of 11 years, and mother of 2 grown daughters, who only call on Sundays. I wasn't unhappy, not really, but I wasn't exactly seen either. Not in the way a person wants to be seen, deep down, beyond wrinkles and routines. That afternoon, I was volunteering as usual, organizing art supplies in the back room. The center had recently started a community painting class, and I'd promised to help with registration. I liked the way paint smelled. I liked the quiet hum of creative people in motion. He walked in late. Tall, lean, disheveled in a charming, unbothered way. A gray hoodie over a paint-stained white t-shirt, jeans that looked like they'd been through a few too many canvases. He flashed a crooked smile at the front desk girl, then looked past her, and our eyes locked. I don't know what made me hold that gaze. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was loneliness, but I didn't look away. He didn't either. Later I'd learn his name was Ethan Monroe, 26, a freelance muralist who did commission work for downtown shops and cafes. He'd come to the class because the city canceled a project he was working on, and he needed a creative space to breathe, as he put it. But in that moment, I didn't know any of that. All I knew was that this young man, this stranger, had seen me, not as some elderly helper or part of the furniture. He'd looked straight into my eyes like he saw something worth looking at, and God help me, I felt it. The next week I tried not to watch for him. Really, I did. But as I pretended to alphabetize the oil paints, my ears strained for that low laugh I'd heard once, and still remembered, and sure enough, there it was. The soft murmur of his voice, followed by footsteps. He was in the back room. Before I could compose myself, "Hey," he said casually, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "You're Margaret, right?" I turned slowly, trying to act unaffected. "Yes, and you're..." Ethan caught me, he grinned. "I just wanted to say thanks for the supplies last week. Those were the only decent brushes in the room." I smiled politely. "I hoard the good ones in the back." "Artist's secret," he chuckled, noted. Then before walking away he paused. "By the way," he added, "your eyes are incredible. Kind of like stormy skies right before rain." Blinked, stunned. My cheeks flushed instantly. I hadn't heard anything like that since Richard was alive. And even then, he wasn't poetic. I said nothing, just nodded. He walked away like it was no big deal. But to me, it was everything. Over the following weeks, Ethan and I began to talk more. At first it was just brief exchanges. Light-hearted jokes. Compliments about his work. Playful jabs about how he always misplaced the charcoal pencils. But slowly, the conversations deepened. He told me about his mother, who raised him alone in a trailer in Kentucky. About his first mural, a dragon wrapped around the back of a pizza place, and how the owner gave him $5 and a free slice for it. About how he'd spent years drifting from city to city, until the community center offered him some stability. In return, I told him about Richard. About our 32 years of marriage. The comfort, the loyalty, the silence in the final years. I told him about my girl Sima, the overachiever in Chicago, and Lily, the wanderer who never stayed in one place too long. But mostly we talked about little things. Art, music, books. He was obsessed with jazz. I preferred classical. He quoted Rilke. I countered with Frost. He said he loved the way older buildings carried their scars. I said people did too. He smiled when I said that. "I like that about you," he said once, brushing a speck of paint from my wrist. "You speak like someone who's watched the world break, and still believes it's worth painting." I didn't know what to say. No one had spoken to me like that in years. One chilly Thursday, the heater in the back room broke down. Most of the class had gone home early, shivering. But Ethan stayed behind, huddled near a small electric radiator, sketching. In his notebook, I was boxing up paints, when I sneezed. "Twice, you okay?" he asked, rising. "I'm fine," I lied, wiping my nose with a tissue. "Just the cold." He walked over, and without asking, took off his hoodie and draped it around my shoulders. I tried to protest. "Ethan, you'll freeze." Warm-blooded, he said with a wink. Besides, it looks better on you. The hoodie smelled like cedarwood and turpentine and something unmistakably him. We stood there, neither of us speaking. Then he said softly, "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. Double quotes. "Do you think it's weird that I feel more understood in 10 minutes with you than in years with people my age?" I didn't know what to say, but his vulnerability cracked something open in me. "No," I whispered. "I don't think it's weird at all." From that moment on, something shifted. We didn't touch. Not in the way that would raise eyebrows. But there was a nearness and electricity whenever we were alone. He started coming early to class, just to sit near me. I started baking lemon cookies, pretending they were for the group, but always handing him the first one. One night as we were packing up together, he reached for my hand, just for a second. Our fingers brushed. It was nothing, but it was everything. I didn't pull away, and he didn't apologize. When I lay in bed that night, Ethan's voice echoed in my head. "You speak like someone who's watched the world break." Was this breaking something, or was it finally living? The next week brought rain. The kind of spring rain that lingers, gray skies, dripping windows and puddles that swallow reflections whole. I sat by the community center window, waiting for the last stragglers to finish up their canvas cleanup. But secretly, I was waiting for Ethan. He hadn't shown up for class. I told myself it didn't matter. People get busy. Maybe he had a commission. Maybe he was sick. Maybe it was just nothing. But as I waited, my chest ached with a kind of hollowness I hadn't felt in a long, long time. The room emptied out slowly, one painter at a time. I began organizing the brushes like usual, trying to distract myself, when I heard the soft creak of the side door. There he was, soaked from the rain, hoodie clinging to him, jeans muddy at the bottom. His hair, normally tousled, was plastered to his forehead. "Margaret," he breathed, his voice lower than usual. "I'm sorry I'm late." I rushed over with a towel from the supply closet and tossed it at him with mock sternness. "You're dripping all over my clean floors." He laughed, wiping his face. "Guess I missed the cleanup memo." "You missed the class, Ethan." "I know," he said, stepping closer. "But I didn't want to miss you." Those 6 words. That simple sentence undid something inside me. A thread pulled loose from the fabric of my carefully stitched life. We sat in the corner of the studio, both of us on the old paint-speckled couch that no one else liked to use. He told me he'd spent the afternoon helping a friend with a mural at a youth shelter and lost track of time. But the whole time, he confessed, I kept thinking, I should be there, with you. I looked at him carefully. His hands were calloused, his fingernails tinted with traces of teal and crimson. There were tiny paint flecks on his chin. He didn't apologize for the statement. He didn't try to explain it away. And I didn't stop him. Instead, I asked, "What are we doing, Ethan?" His smile faded just a little. Not from fear, but from seriousness. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I just know that when I'm with you, the world feels clearer. Like I've been stumbling through static, and then boom, there's you. Sharp, real, unfiltered." I let out a shaky breath. "I'm 34 years older than you." He nodded. "I know. I've lived a whole life. I have grandchildren. Does that make your soul any less yours?" His words were soft, unflinching, unapologetic. I stared at my hands. My fingers were thinner than they used to be, the veins more prominent. I used to hide them with gloves when I went out. Now, I just tried not to look at them too long. "I'm scared," I whispered. "So am I," he said. We didn't talk about it again for a few days. Things returned to normal, or as normal as they could be after that night. We kept our conversations light and public, always mindful of the eyes around us. But in the quiet corners, in the silences, we shared something deeper. One evening, I walked him to his car in the parking lot behind the center. The wind was cold, his breath clouded in the air. He opened the driver's side door, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Why did you stop painting?" I was startled. "What makes you think I ever did?" He smiled knowingly. "The way you talk about color, texture, light, it's not something you learn from books, Margaret. It's something you feel. You've been in love with paint. I can tell." I hadn't painted in over 20 years. Not since before Richard fell ill. I didn't answer. He reached into his trunk and pulled out a blank canvas, handing it to me gently. Paint something, anything, just for you. I held it against my chest like it might break, and I cried. That night, I set up the easel in my den. For hours, I stood in front of the canvas, brush poised, unsure of where to begin, but eventually my hands started to move. It was slow, uncertain, messy, but it was mine. I didn't even realize I'd painted Ethan's face until the morning light hit the canvas. It wasn't just him, it was the feeling of him. The depth in his eyes, the untamed spirit, the quiet storm. I wrapped the painting and placed it in the back of my closet. I wasn't ready to show him yet, maybe never, but it was the first time in years I felt alive. A week later, Ethan found me sitting on the steps outside the center after a late-night class. The sunset had turned the sky into something out of a watercolor dream. Lavenders, pinks, a touch of gold. He sat beside me, knees brushing mine. Did you paint it? I didn't answer. He looked at me, waiting. Yes, I finally said. His smile stretched wide. Was it about me? I didn't deny it, and he didn't push. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the cicadas hum. Then he asked the question I'd been dreading. Do you ever think about what people would say if they knew? I hesitated. Sometimes, I said. But then I remember, those people don't live my life. They don't sit across from you and feel their world tilt. He looked relieved, like he needed that truth spoken aloud. I don't want to hurt you, Margaret. I know how this might seem, and yet, I replied softly, here we are. He reached for my hand again. Not brushing it this time, holding it. Fingers threaded through mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. A car passed by, its headlights briefly illuminating us. For the first time, I didn't pull my hand away. Something had shifted. It wasn't about scandal or age or judgment. It was about feeling seen finally, truly, by someone who didn't care how many years I'd lived, but only how I'd lived them. And more importantly, how I could live now. The weather turned warmer as spring edged into summer. With it, the community center became livelier. More people attended classes, and the days passed faster. I continued to lead my painting group, while Ethan took over more advanced students, and even held workshops on weekends. He was thriving and I was watching it all unfold with quiet pride. We had become more careful. No stolen glances in public. No long pauses in conversation that gave too much away. But in the quiet moments in the after hours of the center, or during early morning coffee runs, we were slowly becoming something real. One Sunday, Ethan asked if I wanted to drive with him to the nearby lake. He said he needed inspiration. I said I could use a break. We didn't talk much on the drive. The silence between us was easy now, comfortable. When we got to the lake, the sun was soft over the water, casting a golden sheen across the surface. Birds skimmed the shoreline and children laughed in the distance. We sat on the hood of his old Honda, a sketchbook between us. He handed me a pencil. Draw something, he said. I haven't sketched in years. You don't forget how, he whispered. I hesitated, then took the pencil and began moving my hand slowly. A tree, a ripple, the edge of the sky. I could feel him watching me, not with hunger or expectation, but with admiration. I missed this version of you, he said. What version? The one who's not hiding. Afterward, we ate sandwiches and drank lemonade. He threw pebbles into the water while I leaned back on a blanket we'd laid out. I watched his silhouette against the fading sky. Ethan, I said quietly, what is this to you, us? He turned, thoughtful. You're the first person who's ever seen me, he said. Not as someone to mold, not as someone to fix, just me. And that means more than anything I can label. I swallowed hard. I'd been asking myself the same question every night. What are we? What can we possibly be? I was twice divorced. My youngest grandchild had just turned 5. I had a pension, joint pain, and a favorite cardigan I refused to throw out. He was barely older than my son. Yet when he looked at me, I didn't feel 60. I felt like Margaret, just Margaret. That night he dropped me off with his usual warmth, but didn't try to follow me in. I appreciated that. He was always respectful of my boundaries, even the unspoken ones. but I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the sketch I'd made by the lake, the wind in the tree, the soft shading on the water. The pencil strokes looked like mine from 20 years ago, shaky but full of emotion. I got up and walked to the living room, past the bookshelf, and paused at the closet door. Inside was the painting I'd done. Of Ethan. I pulled it out, stared at it under the dim light. He wasn't smiling in the painting, but his eyes held something else. Something deeper, longing, recognition, a kind of connection that scared and soothed me all at once. I wrapped it again and put it back the following week. Something changed. It started with whispers. Jane, one of the older ladies in my class, pulled me aside and said she'd heard rumors. You and that young man, Ethan. People are starting to talk. I stiffened. There's nothing inappropriate happening, Jane. I'm sure there isn't, dear, she replied with a half smile. But you know how people love stories. That afternoon, I told Ethan we needed to be careful. He nodded, understanding instantly. Do you want space? No, I said. But maybe we need to pause. Let things settle. He didn't argue, didn't beg, just gave me a small, respectful nod. I'll wait, he said. I'm not going anywhere. A week passed, then two. We saw each other only in passing, polite nods, soft smiles, the occasional brief conversation about class materials. He never pushed, never asked for more. But I missed him terribly. It was a strange ache, subtle, but persistent. Like a song playing faintly from another room. Familiar and haunting. Then one afternoon, I opened my mailbox and found a small brown envelope. Inside was a card. On the front, a watercolor of a sunflower. Inside, in Ethan's handwriting, some flowers. Bloom late, but they still turned toward the sun. No name, no signature, just that. I clutched it to my chest and cried. That weekend I called him, no small talk. No hesitation. I want to see you, I said. Within the hour, he was on my doorstep. I didn't dress up. I didn't try to hide the lines around my eyes or the age spots on my hands. I opened the door and stood there as I was. He looked at me like I was art. Come in, I said. We didn't talk much. I made us tea. He brought his sketchbook. We sat in the den and listened to music, soft jazz playing low on the old stereo. At one point, he reached over and touched my hand. I didn't pull away. He leaned in slowly, gently, waiting for me to stop him. I didn't. His lips brushed mine, not with fire, but with reverence. It wasn't about lust. It wasn't about rebellion. It was about presence, about choosing to feel something honest in a world that often punishes honesty. We didn't make love that night, but we held each other on the couch, his head on my shoulder, my hand in his hair too. Souls finding a home, not in fantasy, but in truth, he whispered to me sometime before sleep took us both. I don't care if it's a season or a lifetime. Just don't shut the door on us. I kissed his forehead and whispered back, I'm tired of doors. Let's leave this one open. The following days felt like breathing after being underwater. There was no dramatic declaration, no need to tell the world. We simply were, existing in the in-between, where quiet mornings stretched into long evenings, where I found his coffee mug next to mine, and his jacket casually hanging on the coat hook by the door. We didn't move fast. We didn't need to. There was something liberating in letting things unfold without labels or time. Every conversation was a step, every glance a question answered. But of course, the world didn't stay quiet forever. One afternoon, my son Alex dropped by unexpectedly. I hadn't seen him in a few weeks, and I greeted him with open arms. We sat at the kitchen table, drinking tea, chatting about his job, the kids, his latest travel plans. I was happy to see him, until he said, I heard a weird thing at the center the other day. Something about you and Ethan. I froze. He watched my face carefully. I chose honesty. Yes, I said softly. We've become close. Close. His brow furrowed. Mom, he's 26. I know. Do you understand how that looks? What people might assume? I looked at my son, the boy I raised, the man I was proud of, and I saw his discomfort wasn't just about judgment. It was about fear. For me, for how others might treat me, for how fragile everything could suddenly seem. I'm not ashamed, I said calmly. This didn't happen because I was lonely, or because I lost my mind. It happened because he sees me, and I see him. That's all. He didn't speak for a moment. Then quietly, are you in love with him? I smiled, not because it was funny but because the answer came without hesitation. Yes. The weeks that followed were harder. Word got around. I could see it in the eyes of my friends. The sudden pauses in conversation when I walked into a room. The polite smiles that felt stretched too tight. Even the painting class felt different. One day observant Jane approached me after class. Margaret, she said, I may not understand it, but I do hope you're happy. I blinked, surprised. I am. She nodded. Then that's what matters. Just be careful, not with him, with the world. I thanked her. Her words stayed with me. Be careful with the world. That evening, Ethan and I went for a walk in the neighborhood park. The sky was painted in soft purples and oranges, and the wind carried a faint chill. We sat on a bench near the rose bushes. He reached for my hand, and I gave it freely. Do you regret it? I asked. He turned to me slowly. Us? I nodded. Never. He looked forward. It's strange though. I've never had to defend who I love before. And now, I find myself building walls around something that's supposed to be open. I squeezed his hand. You shouldn't have. Too, he looked at me with those clear, steady eyes. Neither should you. We started making plans. Nothing grand, just small things. A weekend trip to the countryside, a new art exhibit coming to town. He suggested we co-lead a painting retreat. In the fall, just the two of us. I said yes. And yet even in the joy of our day-to-day, I sensed a question lingering between us. One neither of us dared to ask yet. What happens next? It came to a head on a Thursday night. We had dinner at my place. I made chicken pot pie, his favorite hand. He brought a bottle of wine. We ate, laughed, shared stories about childhood. Afterward, he helped me do the dishes, and then we sat on the couch in soft silence, listening to the rain tapping against the windows. He broke it first. Have you thought about what this could look like in a year? I didn't pretend to misunderstand. Yes, I said. A little. He leaned forward. Would you ever consider living together? It wasn't said with pressure. Just curiosity, hope, maybe even fear. I took a deep breath. I would bet. Not now. Not yet. He nodded, but I could see the disappointment flicker in his eyes. Sometimes I want more of you, he admitted. Not just stolen hours. I want boring mornings and grocery runs and late-night arguments about which movie to watch. I smiled at that. You want the ordinary parts? Yeah, he said, because I think the way we love each other would make even those parts feel extraordinary. That night, after he left, I sat by the window and thought about everything I'd ever been taught about love. That it was supposed to come in certain packages, at certain ages, follow certain paths. But Ethan had ripped those ideas wide open, and what had rushed in through the cracks was something messy, beautiful, and entirely my own. A few weeks later, we took that countryside trip. It was just 2 days, a small cabin, an easel, and silence. We painted, ate simple meals, sat under stars. On the second night, as we stood on the porch watching fireflies dance across the dark, he turned to me and said, I don't want to be your secret anymore. I looked at him. He continued, I know it's easier that way, safer, but I want to hold your hand in public. I want to introduce you as the woman I love. I want us to be real, not just in here, he said, gesturing to the cabin, but out. There I felt the fear rise in me, old, stubborn fear, of judgment, rejection, of losing respect, of people whispering in disgust. But I also felt something else. Pride, because I wasn't afraid of us anymore. I reached for his hand. Okay, I said. Let's not be a secret. We went back to the city and started showing up together. At first, people stared, some smiled, some judged, but others surprised me. Quiet nods of support, gentle smiles. Even one of the younger women at the center came up and said, You give me hope, Margaret. That love doesn't come with an expiration date. My son took longer, but one night, he came to dinner, brought his wife and kids. And when Ethan shook his hand, there was no tension, just a quiet acceptance, maybe even respect. Afterward, as I walked them out, Alex hugged me tight. I'm still getting used to it, he said. But I can see it now. You're happy. I nodded. I am. Ethan and I didn't follow a traditional path. We never needed to. What we had didn't require validation, just courage. Courage to defy time. Courage to love loudly. Courage to be seen as we truly were, and we were seen, not just by each other, but eventually, by the world. He still calls me Mags, and every time he does, it makes me feel like a girl discovering the thrill of her first crush. I still make his coffee, and he still leaves little watercolor notes for me to find tucked in drawers or slipped inside library books. Some nights we dance in the living room to old records. No rhythm, no plan, just movement, just us. And every time I look at him, I think I may have lived 60 years before I met him. But the life I started living after, that's the one that finally felt like mine.